Hello, my name is Holly Little, and you are listening to the Woman to Warrior show. And this show is for women who are ready to step into their power and claim all the benefits that come along with that. So today's training video, Nuggets of Gold, is going to be about triggers. Now, I've chosen this topic because I know it's one that 100% of the people out there watching this will have experienced. And there are a couple of things around triggers that it's super useful to know, that my clients find it super useful to know. And it enables them to deal with their everyday life and the people in their lives so much easier and so much better. So the two things that I want to go through about triggers is, what do they do to us and how do they happen? Because both of those things are important and they kind of work hand in hand when it comes to, I guess, what we can handle and what we can't. And as I said, we've all been triggered, and it does seem to be a bit of a buzzword. There are triggers everywhere. There are trigger warnings everywhere. Some of those warnings, legitimate warnings, and they should be there. Others kind of seem to be pandering to the crowd a little bit. It's just like there's a warning label and everything. And the danger with that is, from what I see, is because it's such a buzzword and because people feel the need to put this trigger warning on just about everything, it almost gives us permission to think that a trigger is something that we can't help, which is a load of crap, okay? Which I'll go into the reasons why that's a load of crap shortly. But just know that we can 100% help our triggers. We can be in charge of them instead of them being in charge of us. And as I said, I'll go through that shortly. Because triggers, as you would know, happen in all avenues of life. I still get triggered by things. And now I have tools for dealing with that when it does happen. Because being in charge of, and I keep calling it triggers, it really annoys me using that word all the time, but it's just so commonly used, can't get away from it, unfortunately. But when it comes to dealing with your triggers, you need good emotional intelligence. It doesn't mean that you won't get triggered. Having good emotional intelligence doesn't mean you won't get triggered, and doesn't mean there isn't anything you can do about it, okay? And I have, as I said, been triggered by many things in life and still am and still will be, probably forever and a day. It's just human nature. But as I said, what we do with those triggers and how we deal with that is completely up to us. I've been triggered by politics, still get triggered by politics at times. Unfairness, that's a big trigger for me. When I see something that I don't see as fair, I used to get so triggered when I was younger about that. And when I say younger, like I was talking in my late 20s and 30s. I'm in my 50s now. So I get triggered by poor behavior by men. I get triggered by poor behavior by women. Lots of different things. But as I said, I've got a lot of tools now to help me bypass that so that my life, the quality of my life and my relationships is so much better. I had a mentor say to me once, she said, if you can't stop yourself being triggered, then you shouldn't be a part of the conversation. So if you can't stop yourself being triggered, you shouldn't be a part of the conversation. And this is the first part I want to talk about, is what happens when we get triggered. Okay, I don't know if you've noticed. Have you ever been triggered and all of a sudden you get stupid? Like your IQ literally goes down in that moment. And you're having this moment with somebody else because of something they've said and you might not agree with it, or it totally goes against what you think, or whatever it might be. Your IQ goes down. At that moment when you need it the most, when you really want to articulate the best response ever, and it leaves you, it deserts you because you've allowed yourself to be triggered, rather than being in charge of the conversation, being in charge of your own emotions, so that you can actually articulate beautifully what you need to say, versus being triggered in a conversation or by an event or whatever it might be. Have you ever done this before? You get triggered, and then after the fact, you go, I could have said this and I could have said that. And if I'd have said that, that would just would have blown them out of the water and I would have won the argument. And oh my God, the look on their face would have been priceless. Who's had that conversation in their head before? Usually in the middle of the night as well. And I think we've all been there. And that's where you want to be when you're actually having that conversation. You don't want it to be an afterthought when all of a sudden your brain still starts to kick in again. You go, oh, damn it, bugger that up again, didn't I? So that that is where you want to get to, where you're a little bit more in charge of that. And that comes to the second part of the conversation that I want to talk to you about, which is how triggers come about. And as I said in the beginning, nothing triggers us. We're triggering ourselves. Nobody ever triggers us. We trigger us. And some of you may be triggered by that. And that's okay. But stick with me, because this is the way the brain works. And most of us are completely unaware of it. And because we're unaware of it, we can't change it. I'm going to talk to you now. Your awareness will expand, and all of a sudden you'll be able to do something differently. Okay? So we trigger us, because what happens is, and this is the way with all the information that we take in, right? Something happens. Somebody says something, an event happens, whatever it might be. That then gets processed in our mind by our unconscious mind. We don't consciously filter through that. We don't filter through what's just been said. All we do is put it into our unconscious mind. Our unconscious mind has all these different parameters. I guess you could say it's got all these dot points it has to look at and go, well, how does that sit with our beliefs? How does that sit with our values? How does that sit with how we were raised? How does that sit with what happened when we went to school, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, whatever the case may be. So the unconscious mind filters through all of those things and so much more. And then the response comes out, which is the trigger, us being triggered. That trigger then comes out after our unconscious mind has filtered it. And then you say, well, how can I stop that happening? Well, now you are aware of it. What you're wanting to do now is make the unconscious conscious. So the moment someone says something that you feel a little bit of a rise in blood pressure, perhaps, that's a signal to you to stop and to think. Am I getting triggered? Why is this coming up? Does this person really mean that? Should I be asking them questions about what they just said? In fact, that's a really good one, because getting curious about what other people have said and asking them questions, good questions, not shitty questions, not questions that are born from you being pissed off at them, but getting really curious about them. And what that tends to do is, when you're curious about someone else, like genuinely curious about what's making them tick, how they came to that conclusion, all those sort of things, number one, hey, your mind might change yourself. Number two, you drop into empathy, because you can't get truly curious about what someone else is saying and thinking and feeling and doing without having a level of empathy with it. All right? So, as I said, we are making all that unconscious stuff, we're making it conscious. And then you can spit out a different behavior. You can spit out a different response. And because there is a gap between when that person says something and when you are triggered, if you are triggered. There's a wonderful book called Man's Search for Meaning, and it was written by a man called Viktor Frankl. And he was in a couple of, 2 or 3 concentration camps in World War II. And the book was about man's search for meaning. So basically, what was the difference between people in the concentration camps who, I won't say thrived, who could deal with what was happening to them at a better rate, as opposed to those who couldn't deal with what was happening at all? And what he found was that the people who found more meaning and purpose, so for the people in the concentration camps, it was generally something along the lines of, wanting to see their loved ones again. It might have been, wanting to live a lifelong dream that they were still hoping would happen when they got out of the concentration camp. So those people who had that meaning and purpose, they survived in those environments far, far better than the people who felt that they had nothing to live for. So that's where the man's search for meaning, that's where that comes from. And the reason why I'm telling you about this is because he has this quote, and it's an oftentimes quoted quote, and it goes along the lines of this. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So I'll say that again. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So basically, when somebody says something to you that you find triggering, or you used to find triggering, or it's rubbing you up the wrong way, that is the stimulus. The response is how we deal with it. And what Viktor Frankl was saying was there is a space in our unconscious mind when that happens where we have the power to choose our response. And if we choose that response correctly, it gives us more freedom. It gives us more personal growth because we're much better emotionally regulated. So at all times, remember that you are in charge of your triggers. You know, part of this work that I do, and a lot of the work that I do with the women in the Woman to Warrior program, is creating awareness. And the reason why we create awareness around all of that, such as what I've been going through today, is because awareness, and you'll probably hear me say this many times, awareness is the key to transformation. You cannot transform if you don't know what it is you are transforming. And that's why I want to bring more of these videos to you guys, because the more power and the more knowledge you have, the more power you have access to. Okay, the more knowledge you have, the more awareness you have, the more power you have access to. Now, how you choose to use that power is completely up to you. You know, I just bring you information at this stage, and I would love it if some of you can go forward and use it in your day-to-day life, because therein lies your growth and your freedom, right? According to Viktor Frankl. So I hope you and trust you found this has been useful. Two things. Remember, when you are triggered, what happens is you get stupid. And that's totally your choice if that's what you want. But if you don't want to be stupid, then understand that you are in charge of your triggers. You trigger yourself. Nobody else triggers you. And that can give you so much power in so many situations in your life, in your relationships, in work, in business, everything. You will now have the power should you choose to use it. And I really hope you do. So, ladies, this is the end of this very first episode. As I said, I am going to be loving bringing you more of these. Give it a like, because that'll be great payment for having done the video for you. I would love it if you could do that. And also just send someone the link if they need to hear it, if they can benefit from it. And otherwise, I shall see you in the next episode. And thank you so much for watching or listening.